So I see that we're now here on Facebook Live, and I welcome everyone to the June 15th, 2020 Brookhaven City County work session. Call that roll.
Mayor John Ernst,
That's me.
Councilmember Lanny Jones,
Has not arrived yet.
Councilmember John Park,
Here.
Councilmember Madeline Simmons,
Present.
You unmuted? I mean, you muted.
I'm unmuted, but I don't hear her.
No, I know. I think she went mute just then. I think there was an echo going on. And I see that Councilmember District 4, Joe Gebbia is here.
Here.
There you go. And looks like Councilwoman District 1, Lindley Jones is here. We were doing roll call and we've lost the city clerk.
Oh, no. Well, I'm sorry I'm late.
That's okay. We getting roll call. Chris, on a legal front, can we go forward with it with me calling the roll, or since we're recording, we're all here?
Yeah, you're fine. The roll call is a formality just to make sure that everybody's present, but we can see that, and the record will reflect that everybody's here by the time you started business.
You want to do the roll call again?
Well, we're just down for Joe, and then Lindley showed up, so we're all here. I think formality, we're all here, and we don't need to, especially for a work session. So with that, opening remarks. Hey everyone, welcome to the city work session. One item that I do want to talk right off the top is obviously we had two major crime incidents in the city in the last couple weeks since our last meeting. And our thoughts and prayers with the victims, all the victims, and thank the police for their diligence and to come into resolution on these issues. There's a lot of folks out there that are concerned with the uptick of perceived crime, and I've asked staff to do a report that we'll have on the June 29th meeting. I think council will get that report a few days in advance, a week in advance. We can get real good questions from that. But as always, public safety is job number one for the city, and we're going to be diligent and thoughtful in the ways we address it every which way. And then I'll probably say relatively the same thing in my opening remarks on the regular meeting. With that opening remarks I'll go with Joe since you're in my list in that direction. Joe first.
I'm fine, thank you.
Madeline was second place. Anything?
Yeah, I'll be giving remarks during the regular meeting. Thank you.
Okay, John.
No, thank you.
Lindley.
Yes, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Chief Andura and all of our terrific Brookhaven police officers who have conducted such exemplary investigations of the recent incidents and with great results. And we are very appreciative for the effort that has taken during especially these last two incidents. And we're always mindful of their diligence and sacrifices. And so thank you to our officers.
Okay. Department reports.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, City Council. We will start with the Police Department, followed by Communications.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As you mentioned, we did have a very busy week. We'd like to thank the residents and the other agencies that were involved with us helping locate the suspect that we did arrest. It was through their help and aid that we were able to come to a successful conclusion, and hopefully the family is doing well now. To go along with that and some of the kudos he gave us, we're losing a Major Renan Lopez. I think all of you are aware. He's going to be chief starting Monday of the Morrow Police Department. We're proud of him. That's the second command staff member that we ended up losing that actually I look forward when they could improve themselves and move up in any organization. And we've got Renan going tomorrow as chief of police. We lost our previous lieutenant from CID also. That was Tyrone Oliver, who's now commissioner of DJJ for the state of Georgia. So we're proud of both of them. Our Special Olympics, we'd like to thank all the residents and all the officers that went out. We raised over $9,100 at Dunkin' Donuts a few weeks ago. That gives us a total of about $15,000, which is going to go hand in hand with allowing us, because we were the top agency at an individual location to raise that much money. It puts us in the top 5, which allows us to have a participation in the torch run, which actually will take place. There's 4 stops in Georgia. I think I mentioned before, May 27th of 2022. It's going from Chicago to Orlando. One of the stops will be in town Brookhaven. So we're looking forward to that, and they'll probably ask some of you to speak. They'll have a torch lighting ceremony there, and it'll be about 2 hours. So we're looking forward to that in 2022. As you mentioned too, we've been very busy. Our SWAT team, we have the North Metro SWAT team, which involves us, Sandy Springs, Dunwoody, and Johns Creek. We've had 3 SWAT callouts in the past 2.5 weeks. 2 of them were in Sandy Springs. One of them was very serious, where we had a subject that was wanted by the U.S. Marshals for at least 30 murders in the Baltimore area. He actually fired at one of our lieutenants 3 to 5 times. Luckily, he was missed. And just as it kicked in the door, he committed suicide. And then we had the other SWAT call out, which occurred in our town, which ended tragically also. As far as other business going on, our mental illness calls have went up dramatically in the last couple of months, probably more in the last 2 months than I've had in my entire career, which has been a pretty long time. We're working with Georgia NAMI on that, and Behavioral Health Link and DBHDD through the state. Everyone's has the same problem happening, and we're trying to find some solution or help for some of these people. And as Christian mentioned, our crimes, or as the mayor mentioned, the crimes have increased. It's not all that much, but we're preparing a report. We'll have that ready for the next council meeting. We're also looking at our beat structure. I'm not sure if that'll be included next time, but we're reviewing all that, and we'll get all that information to you shortly. And then we look forward later on, Lieutenant Abram Ayana will be putting on a nice presentation on a drone program that you all approved a couple months ago. So we look forward to that too. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Gary. I'm going out of order for the department head, so I'm sorry if I'm creating any confusion because they're moving around the screen on me here. We'll do communications now, followed by strategic partnerships.
Good evening. Our communications has completed the letters and door hangers for the redistricting. Our Spanish summer newsletter is in-house, and we're going to start working on the following shortly. And we'll be doing another Parks Bond update. In this one, we think it worked out well the first time. And we've also been working on the communications for the summer block party. So we did our canvassing to area businesses last week. We've done our website. We're doing website updates, and we're coordinating ads and social media with Explore Brookhaven and Lens Marketing. And we expect to do our major announcement next week. And press releases have included the paving season kickoff, dive-in movie, food trucks, and millage rate.
Thank you very much. Strategic partnerships followed by economic development.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I've been working quite a bit I'm looking through my notes, about 2 weeks on a lot of regional projects, starting out with joining our city manager and the city manager and staff of the city of Doraville and the Peachtree Creek Greenway group for a tour and knowledge share on the Peachtree Creek Greenway as they seek to work out ways to move their end of the Greenway forward. It's very exciting to see that sort of regional participation happening. As you know, DeKalb County, I think I reported at the last meeting, has allocated funding for a study for the gaps from pretty much from our line to Doraville. So when Doraville coming in and the work being done in the city of Atlanta, that has every bit of it really in some phase, which is much more than just talking about, which is what the county did for about 20 years. So at the other end of the Greenway, I met last week with the city of Atlanta, the Regional Trails Group and the Atlanta Regional Commission. Their plan for the link is in entering the final draft phase. So they will be bringing that out and getting public comment on that in the next several weeks. They've got a great website up. I learned a lot from how they're communicating, but also was very grateful that they have included us in the entire planning process. In addition to that, we've been working with MARTA, Atlanta Link, and the project staff on phase 3 of the top end transit study. You'll recall that Brookhaven is the administrative agent for that study. That also is coming into the final draft phase. So we are preparing communications materials, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that from us in the next week or so. Related to all of this, of course, I've been working with the staff of our DC representatives to keep our Brookhaven member designated funding requests at the top of their lists. This includes working with all of our local partners and businesses to get their input on how important those particular projects are from a regional basis, but also a local basis, basically to our citizens and businesses, and making sure that that input gets also to the top of the list as those funding requests are working through committees at this time. Other than that, I've been tracking on the federal level. There are numerous programs that have been in existence for years, but they're seeing changes under the new administration. Many of those changes are beneficial to Brookhaven. It's really an exciting time. Today, Brian Borden and I both attended several hours presentation from the Department of Natural Resources on the federally funded regional trails program that is going to be opening very, very soon. I think from that meeting today, Brian and I had a conversation. I think we've got some real strong projects we'll be able to bring forward to you for consideration for submission. And also on the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Program. We attended both and it's always great to be keeping up on what's happening on those staff and scoring levels. And I'm happy to answer any questions later, but that's where I've been at. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patty. Economic development followed by human resources.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Projects are continuing to move forward in economic development. One thing I do want to highlight is our robust business community. Last week, we had the ribbon cutting ceremony for NCG Cinemas in Northeast Plaza. They opened actually right before things closed down for the pandemic last year. So they postponed the ribbon cutting ceremony to last Thursday. If you're wanting to catch a movie in the city, their seats are very comfortable. The popcorn is great. And the mural outside of it is very reflective and intentional to reflect the community. So stop by and visit when you get a chance, and please continue to support all of our businesses throughout the city.
Thank you, Charlene. HR, human resources, followed by tourism. Marina.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We have a new hire starting in the police department on June 28th. A conditional offer has been extended for the public engagement specialist position. The Wellness Committee is currently hosting a STEP challenge. It started on June 7th and it'll go through June 30th. And then the Wellness Committee is also hosting registration costs for city employees again this year for the Brookhaven Police Hot Pursuit Glow Run. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Lena. We'll do tourism followed by Parks and Recreation.
Hey, welcome and for a lovely Tuesday afternoon. Been very busy working with our partner, the City of Brookhaven, to ensure a very successful event at the end of July. We'll talk a little bit more about risk management later in the executive session. Trying to keep our brand alive. Funding has started picking up a bit, so that's a nice addition. And have reached out and contracted with a couple of sales associates that will represent us in different travel markets starting this summer. So trying to get Brookhaven's name out for meetings and events and group business. So that concludes what we've been working on. If you have any questions, just let me know.
Thank you very much, Renee. Parks and Recreation, followed by Public Works.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. It's a busy time in Parks and Recreation now that the summer's here and everybody's ready to get out from the pandemic. A lot of good stuff going on. Our Ashford Park splash pad, the contractor should be finishing up tomorrow with the installation of the colors, the color rosin, the rubberized surface. And that will need to cure for 3 days. So Lee and the contractor are working very hard to possibly try to get something put together for a grand opening, ribbon cutting early next week. We'll be in touch. We will continue to keep everyone updated and work with Burke and Anne-Marie in the communications department as we get more information from the contractor on when it will be ready to open to the public and put out a press release for the ribbon cutting. Also this past weekend, our staff hosted our first dive-in movie night of the season. We held it at the Murphy Kendall Pool on Saturday night. We showed the Disney movie Coco, which is another great Disney movie. We had a great attendance, between 75 and 100 people came out to attend the movie on Saturday night, which was a beautiful night after the storms rolled through. So it was a good turnout. Also on Saturday, we opened the Linwood Park pool. We finally got our issues resolved with it and got approval from the Department of Health to open. So we now have all 3 pools open. And as a reminder to those watching, please remember, if you have young children under the age of 3, please make sure they're wearing swim diapers when they come to the pool. We have swim diapers at the pools. We'll be more than happy to give you some if you do not have any when you arrive. This will help us to avoid any unnecessary incident closures in the pool that we've been experiencing here the first few weeks of pool season. So please remember, children under 3, please make sure your child has on a swim diaper. Also, tomorrow night is our first night of the Blackburn Park Food Truck Wednesdays. Our first time in a year and a half that we've been able to host this event. So we're looking forward to that. We'll have approximately between 6 to 8 food trucks, bouncy houses, some live music. So it should be a great night. The weather's going to be perfect tomorrow night. So come out to Blackburn Park tomorrow night between 6 and 9 for our Food Truck Wednesday. It starts tomorrow and runs through Wednesday, October the 27th. And also staff, along with various other departments, are continuing to support Mallory and Patty as they continue to make the arrangements as we get closer to our first ever Cherry Blossom Summer Block Party event at the MARTA station. So a lot of stuff going on in parks right now. So, but that concludes everything for parks.
Thank you, Brian. If the mayor and council will indulge me for a quick question, will the lobster roll truck be back for the food truck?
I can find out for you, but usually it's just a luck of the draw. There's about 30 trucks that they have at the Food Coalition. We never know what we're getting until they show up, but I will put in a special request for the lobster truck.
I just understand it's a hit in the community. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Public Works, followed by Community Development.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Our 2021 street paving has begun. We're focusing right now on the streets that are able to do a mill and inlay. Longwood Trace and Sheridan Court are complete. They're currently working on a portion of Citadel, and then they'll be moving over to East Osborne. We're still waiting to find out what's going to happen with the rest of the streets for this year, and that they're still reporting a shortage in Portland cement. So we'll keep everybody posted on that. Capital improvement projects under construction. Our CMAC project along Dresden Road is moving along. You'll see a lot of new poles for traffic lights and pedestrian crossings in progress. Our Osborne Wisdom Road roundabout is slowly moving along is about the best way to describe that one. We discovered some additional underground utilities that belong to AT&T that they weren't even aware of. So now we're going to have to wait on AT&T to get back out there and relocate some underground utilities. Peachtree Road and Ashford Dunwoody, if you've driven by there lately, you'll notice they're starting to bring in a lot of fill dirt and working on that area to start raising the roadway up. And Atlanta Gas Light is coordinating in regard to the gas lines along Peachtree Road. Our sidewalk at Briarwood and Beaufort Highway, the wall's complete, backfilled. Georgia Power and Atlanta Gas Light need to come in now and take advantage of the new width there and get their utilities moved over so we can do the widening in that area. West Nancy Creek Drive is probably catching a lot of attention. We've got the large pipe that's being replaced between two homes that's going to require a closure of a portion of West Nancy Creek between Brooklawn and Old Johnson Ferry, but because of traffic in that area being so heavy, we're rerouting everybody down Ashford, Dunwoody, and onto Johnson Ferry. So that'll be about a 6-week process that we're trying to keep through traffic out of that area. Our Dresden Drive safety analysis is in process. They've had 2 site intercept surveys that they've held. They would like to have their first public forum scheduled for the 13th of July, and the first presentation to City Council then will be at the July 29th meeting. We were awarded the $150,000 safety grant for pedestrian signalization from Georgia DOT. So we'll be proceeding with that. And then we have several things that will be coming up over the next month, including bringing the Northeast Expressway multi-use path before y'all on the 29th. And then of course our multi-use path, the remainder of it anyway, on Briarwood is in design. So I hope to see something in the next week or 2 on that.
Thank you, Don. While it's not a public works project, a quick update on the public safety building. If you're down at the site, you'll see both of the cinder block stairwells for the building. They're 3 stories high. Looks like 2 columns coming out of the ground, but the foundation walls are in. There'll be major grading work taking off all of the excess soil in the next week or so. And that'll become a regular update to the council and the mayor on future meetings, when we're also planning on a tour of the site. As soon as they clear out all of the unneeded soils and we get a dry day, we'll take a tour of the site. With that, community development followed by the finance department.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. One quick update and one short report for you today. The City Center Master Plan consultant has wrapped up the stakeholder interview process, and we anticipate that they will move into the next round of public engagement. Once we have a firm schedule on that, I will make sure to get that to you. The short report that we wanted to provide to you today was related to dockless mobility, and I'm going to share my screen really quickly. So if you recall, in 2017 and 2018, the department researched dockless mobility, and ultimately council adopted an ordinance around that topic. Since that time, we've had one group come to the department to get the permit to be a dockless mobility provider within the city, and that is Bird. Here, and you can see the report that's been prepared by our GIS manager, Leo Ladafian, for the months of February through April of this year. So Bird has had almost 1,800 trips in the city, no injuries reported, and only 3 complaints. 2 were related to requests to remove vehicles from town Brookhaven, and then the 3rd was from to remove the vehicles from the Windsor Mabry intersection. So we're happy so far with the reporting that's come out of the ordinance requirements. We'll continue to monitor this and bring this report to you quarterly in anticipation of Bird reapplying for their renewal permit at the end of the year.
I can just say I saw Bird for the first time on Windsor Parkway 2 days ago. I told people up and down Windsor. It's the first time I've seen it in that area. Anyway.
Thank you, Patrice. Finance Department, followed by Assistant City Manager Steve Chapman.
Good afternoon, Mayor Nernst and City Council. The main focus of the Finance Department lately has been on financial and compliance reporting. we're close to the 180-day mark that is since that comes since the closing of the fiscal year of the city, and we're ensuring that all reporting requirements are being met, reporting with the state and also with the applicable federal agencies in regards to the single audit report that we had this year. And this concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Assistant City Manager Stephen Chapman.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. Glad to be back after a few days. As you can tell, we have a full agenda for you this evening, and we've been working diligently on making sure that the millage numbers look good for all of the different funds that we have to set millage for. In addition, as you all are aware, our well thought of Human Resources Director, Rick Stone, will be leaving us in the next few weeks. And we've been working diligently with our outside contractor to get some qualified candidates to consider going forward. And we'll be concluding that process in the next week or so. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer.
Thank you, Steve. And I'll close with the administration has provided reopening recommendations to the City Council Task Force on reopening. And we're also focusing on our knowledge management efforts and customer service. Right now we have over 200 Brookhaven Connect requests open at this time. That's an unacceptable number, but I know it's a historical number based on the growing season and the mowing season, but we're looking at processes to see if we can't bring that number down. That concludes the department reports for this week.
Okay, questions for staff? I see Madeline first, raise your hand first, and then Lynn Lu go, and then Joe.
Thank you. And thank you to all the staff for those wonderful reports. My questions are directed to the chief and/or Christian. Could you talk with us a little bit about the enhanced safety measures that are happening at the Peachtree Creek Greenway?
Yes, the near-term items are pretty straightforward. We changed the schedule for the park maintenance crew. The maintenance crews now are there 7 days a week in all our parks, emptying the trash, checking for graffiti. We're making sure, at least for the Greenway, they stop more than once a day on the weekends, and they do it during activity hours. Sometimes they're at 8 in the morning. We'll make sure they're during activity hours. Brian is looking at, our parks director is looking at additional cameras to the approaches of the Greenway. The Greenway currently has 20 cameras on it, and they did a really good job of identifying the suspect in this case, but we actually want to have cameras that are at all the entrances, the side streets and such, so we can see people coming and going, if you will, for lack of a better term. Additionally, the police department will be doing enhanced patrols and even considering some plain clothes every now and then. So those are some near-term actions for the Greenway. Gary, do you want to add anything?
No, a number of us continue to patrol it. We're trying to find a location to locate our Ranger, the Polaris Ranger that we have, because it needs to be charged up. We're working with the Salvation Army. I think we've got a spot there. I walk it myself 1 or 2 days a week, the entire length, back and forth. The cameras picked up everything. The cameras actually cover pretty well what needs to be covered. The area where this unfortunate attack took place, the suspect went up an embankment or whatever. He was in and out of there within 30 seconds after that attack happened. So you got to take that into consideration too, I think.
Sure. I certainly think that the community will have a stronger sense of safety, seeing some increased officers out there and presence, and perhaps I know we had talked a little bit about maybe some additional signage that is telling folks that they are on camera if they aren't noticing the cameras themselves, and maybe that being a little bit of a crime deterrent. So that all sounds great.
I forgot about that one. Yes, that's the immediate action we'll be doing is additional signage on cameras.
Thank you. That all sounds great. I know we've asked Chief at a couple of the other meetings if you felt as though you needed any more resources for the mental health crisis intervention folks, and whether or not we needed another couple people doing that. And you had previously said, you know, who we've got have been doing a great job. But I did notice that in today's report, you talked about, you know, how our mental health calls are way up these last 2 months. Do you feel as though it would be helpful to have some additional resources if possible for that department?
Down the road, I think the whole criminal justice system needs a bit of checking and seeing what needs to be done. You know, right now we're working with Georgia NAMI. I'm on the board there, and you know, right now our jails, unfortunately, are used as mental institutions basically, because they banned those a number of years ago because of the stigma attached to them. I think something needs to be brought out or you know, made available to help in those circumstances. I think the pandemic helped a little bit with causing a lot of the problem that's going on now, a lot more domestics. And as I said, a lot more mental illness consumers that we're dealing with lately.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Lindley. Is that all, Madeline? I just want to make sure.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Lindley.
Brian, I wanted to ask you if there's any update regarding the construction and pending permits for the community green at Murphy Candler.
Yes, ma'am. They are currently, Lee is working on those. They are in permitting. Let me get my notes here real quick.
Actually, they're through permitting and they're in purchasing.
Yeah, actually, that's right, Christian. Yeah, purchasing has those now. So I was looking at a different project.
Okay, so the permits were granted, right?
Purchasing has it to put it together to put out to bid.
Okay, and what is the expected time frame for that process of putting it together to put it out for bid? When do we think it's going out for bid, in other words?
I will have to get with Shakira to ask her. She was out of the office last week, so she's just now getting back in and getting caught up. So I will touch base with her first thing in the morning and find out when that will actually hit the street.
Great, thank you very much, and I would appreciate an update on that, and that's my only question.
Okay. Joe?
Thank you. Couple of quick ones here. First, to Patty and to Sherlyn. Thanks for your updates on the Peachtree Creek Greenway. It is exciting what's happening with the expansion mode and the attention for a bigger project. Can we consider doing some type of survey or some type of investigative work to look what the economic development potential would be along our portion of the Peachtree Creek Greenway from current landowners along there? Let's tap into that and see. I've spoken to a number of them, like Petite Violette and Salvation Army in particular, and they all have expectations of what they would like to do. It would be nice if, maybe you've done this already, I don't know, but it would be nice to know how this, really what people are thinking and what that potential is, so we can begin to incorporate it.
I'll just answer first. I think what you're asking is what our own businesses want to do related to the Greenway, which is a Sherlyn question. There are studies, of course, on the economic impact of various multi-use trails in the metro region that I use for my information and to advocate for it. But I think your question is directed more specifically at what the impact is, be what our folks are doing. So I'm going to just move over to Sherlyn, and if there's anything I can help with, let me know.
Yeah, of course. Similar to Patty, I use the same data when I'm determining what the impact of trails and things like that are in a community, but I can certainly reach out to our businesses and get a better understanding of what it is that they're wanting and connect with you as well to make sure that we understand what you're seeking.
Well, the information you both just shared is that you're using studies to say what could be, and I'm saying let's look at what's there and see what wants to be and help them bring it to fruition. Okay, that's the first. Secondly, Chief, I remember reading on the situation that unfolded at the Peachtree Creek Greenway that the suspect that was arrested had 18 previous arrests I think that's correct. I didn't get into the details. Unfortunately, I didn't have time. You know more about this than I do. Can you comment on that?
Just briefly and without getting into detail, he did something like that in another halfway house or location he was at, dealing with mental illness, but he also had previous arrest for similar things. He never did actually what he did in Brookhaven here, but he did approach females and was asking for phones and things like that. So,
if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time we've had an incident like this in any of our parks since our inception as a history. Is that correct?
that's correct. And we never had an incident at all on the Greenway. This is the first incident on the Greenway also.
Well, my original question was to see if this is a byproduct of a breakdown of our justice system, as we've seen in the past.
I believe he was just arrested about a year ago, if I'm not mistaken, for a similar incident where he grabbed a lady and took a phone away.
All right, thank you for that.
Okay.
Brian, on the food truck situation, years ago we had a conversation, and although we know there's a lead food truck company that takes liability responsibility and then assembles the other participants, we had talked about trying to prioritize any or maybe select members, and Lindley, you might want to jump in on this one, if they were Brookhaven based, to make sure that Brookhaven owners of food trucks had representation at our events. Do you recall that, and are you still following through on that?
I do not recall that, Councilmember Gabby. We get all of our food trucks through the Street Food Coalition.
Right.
Provide food trucks all over the city of Atlanta and the metro area. So I can check with them to see which ones are Brookhaven based.
Well, I know that we had the conversation about there was an outside entity controlling who was being included, but our request was to specifically promote Brookhaven candidates in that lineup, at least a select few. Do you remember that, Lindley? All right. So
I will reach out to them and check and see which there's about 30 trucks that are part of the group. And I will follow up with the Street Food Coalition in the morning and find out which trucks they have that are Brookhaven and try to at least see what we can do to make sure we have at least 1 or 2 trucks every week from Brookhaven.
yeah, I'd like to suggest a minimum of 10%, which would be 3 in that case, if you have 30 trucks.
Okay. Yes, as long as they've been permitted by the fire marshal, they'll be good to go.
Okay, great. Patrice, on the dockless system for Bird, because it's dockless, these units are going to end up in places where they shouldn't be, and it's going to result in calls. The particular bike that is left behind by an individual, it's known who the renter of that bike is by way of credit card. Is that not true?
Yes, Bird would have that information.
Is there any type of penalty assessed to people who rent bikes and then leave them in places that ends up being a complaint call to us?
No, not to the individual. Bird is on the hook for any non-response or on removal of the units.
Yeah, well, that doesn't solve the problem. All that does is pick it up after it becomes a problem. My suggestion is that it would probably not be a bad idea to have Bird impose a fine to the individual that rents, that leaves them in places where they're not supposed to be. I mean, we're not going to stop the problem unless we attack it from where it's occurring. And it's with the operator of the bike, not the people who pick it up. I'm saying we need to be thinking more about how to prevent those types of problems, because it's just going to get worse as time goes on here. And that is the major problem with dockless systems.
I see the city attorney has turned on his camera, but there are some issues around the proprietary nature of the city knowing who the individual is. That's why the provider is the one that is on the hook with the city.
Well, maybe work it backwards. We find them, and then if they want to get their money back, they find the operator. Chris,
Yes, sir. The council made the decision in dealing with false alarm problems that we were going to hold the companies responsible because they're the ones who had the duty to inform and train their users about what their proper thing was to do. The city's enforcement action and policy with respect to these dockless mobility vendors is similar to what we've done with false alarms. If the company chooses to make a business decision to pass those fines and those penalties on to their customer, that's their choice. Obviously, the legislature stepped in and changed the rules about fines for false alarms last year that we're still trying to work through and understand exactly what that statute does. But with respect to these dockless mobilities folks, as the community development director said, getting that information directly from them about who the user was likely violates the Consumer Protection Credit Act, or the Consumer Credit Protection Act, which is a federal statute, as well as violates various privacy issues between that vendor and their customer. So I'm not sure we can go behind the transaction like you're asking us to, but it's also consistent with our previous enforcement policy choices, as I discussed with respect to false alarms and such.
Okay, that's great. You know, I only made the comment I did trying to suggest a potential solution to a problem that exists if it's not appropriate the way it was worded. The challenge is, what can we be doing? Rather than just saying, okay, we have a complaint, let's put it on Bird to go pick it up. What can we be doing to try and prevent these problems? Because, you know, 1,800 units have been rented for whatever period of time that measurement was. Now that we're back out of COVID, this pace is going to pick up, and it's going to become a much more of a problem, especially when it's blocking sidewalks and then you got your handicap provisions being obstructed. I mean, that was the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems we had before. So I'll put the challenge to you and Chris, to you and Patrice. What type of action can the city be taking to prevent the problem from where it's caused? And then you can put all the legal ramifications of what works, what doesn't work. Is that fair?
Yes, sir. The problem that you identified is one that is faced by every community that's allowed dockless mobility devices in the community. Atlanta has it absolutely in spades. Larger communities are facing these issues much more severely than Brookhaven is. And our footprint actually makes dockless mobility more attractive, frankly, than it does even with mobility options like the Beltline around Atlanta. So this is a topic that is constantly on the forefront for the International Municipal Lawyers Association, for ICMA, and for other organizations to try to figure out what the best solutions to these situations are. And nobody's come up with a good one. The only response that collectively the lawyers who represent local governments have come up with is hold the businesses accountable and make it worth their while to fix this problem. Atlanta went through a period before the pandemic of banning the devices entirely, and have gradually let them back in to try to get people's attention that this is not, business as usual is not going to be acceptable. I'm happy to work with the community development director and the city manager to come up with solutions, but for at least the last 3 years, this has been a topic at every one of the IMLA conferences about what do we do about dockless mobility. And the conversations have included people from industry to saying, what can we do? What can you do to partner with us to fix these problems where we've got people unable to walk down the streets because your devices are in the way? So we'll put our heads together and see if we can brainstorm additional options, but there haven't been good ones proposed yet.
Yep. Well, it's from our reports. It sounds like something that should go on afterwards. We gotta move on.
Done.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
I had a couple other questions, but they're small. I can just take them offline. And no big deal. We have to.
Hey, Mayor.
Yes. Do you have a question?
Real quick, one question. Brian, I'm sorry I didn't hear you. When are we expecting the Ashford Park splash pad to be ready?
Councilmember Park, we're hoping to have an opening sometime early next week. We're waiting on the health inspection that's scheduled to take place on Monday. The contractor is finishing up the color tiles tomorrow, and those need 3 days to cure. So you're looking at Saturday for the third day for the colors to be cured. Then we would try to get it inspected Monday, and then hopefully either maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, we would definitely try to do a ribbon cutting, with all the kids and everything.
So potentially the 22nd or 23rd. So all the parts that were back ordered with the supply chain issues have arrived?
We're working with the contractor, see if we can use a alternative filter until our filters are to the filters that are required for the project arrive, so that we can go ahead and get this open. So that's one of the things we're working through right now with the DeKalb County Board of Health.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we will keep moving on. It's 4:53, so we've gotten through it. Our first hour and department reports. Normally, we have a lot of upcoming agenda items. We have tree ordinance rewrite. Patrice.
Good afternoon again, Mayor and Council, and I'm going to share my screen just so I can talk from it really quickly. So at your May 25th work session, the items here listed were the things that council raised as items that you all wanted to see updated in the tree ordinance, increasing the recompense amount to $240, increasing the cap from 150 inches to 300 inches, requiring the posting of signage 5 days ahead of time, and also requiring the trees proposed for removal with flagging tape, and some more details about what exactly would be placed on the signs that are issued from the city. A couple of additional comments that were made related to ensuring that the department notified all of our contacts about the updated ordinance once it is adopted, and then also developing an ordinance related to invasive vegetation. Following your work session, we held a second work session with Planning Commission. Their comments were largely related to just clarifying some of the language to make it easier for lay people to understand. And then we also reviewed with them some additional comments that we had received from the public, which were primarily related to the process of specimen tree variances and how the public would be engaged in that process. And basically the response was that the variance process would work the same way as any other variance process, that there would be the required notifications, and that people would have an opportunity to speak at the Board of Appeals or at Planning Commission, City Council hearings if it was a concurrent variance. So we're back today. I did provide in your packet an updated markup of the proposed ordinance with the changes that have been discussed. We will do one final update ahead of your meeting on June 29th. Jeff is also here if you all have any follow-up questions to discuss about the project.
Anyone have questions?
So, yeah, I just overall, I had someone ask about the fact that we have ongoing canopy measurement. Is it part of our, we do assessments, it's part of our work plan basically as a city to do a canopy assessment every certain number of years? Is it 5 years typically, or do we have something like that in place?
Right now, we've been tracking every 2 or 3 years. Jeff and I have talked about studies briefly, but I don't think we've set a particular schedule for going forward.
Okay, but when you say every 2 or 3 years, how would you just do the? Would you actually go out and spend money to do a study, or is there something baseline that we can look at, or what are we thinking?
I think, again, in the discussions that I've had with Jeff and with Leo, based on the 3 studies that we've done so far, there are some better technologies and ways to do the study. So it would probably be more likely that we would do it in-house. going forward, but it would just depend on how often council would want us to look at it.
I think it would be good to kind of just establish a pattern, just say this is something we track, we want to track, so that, we don't have to do a study to figure out, what we knew already, that we were losing a lot of canopy. So that it'll maybe like an early warning system. Hey, what's going on? Why are we losing trees? Things like that. Heck, it may be a beetle infestation. I don't know. Some of the other questions. I'd like to just get clarification on variances for specimen trees. So, we had discussed the fact that, we're basically, even if you're building on a lot in the buildable area, you're required to get a variance. And it would be difficult if every single builder had to come in for a variance just so they could build. And so what we did is we just kind of moved the needle a little bit so that, it wouldn't, it's the language I see is it wouldn't, the threshold is a little higher as far as, the 5 inches more. So let's say that they don't need a variance. So does that mean they don't need a variance at all? Or does that mean they get an admin variance if there was a tree that would get ensnared by the specimen tree removal variance requirement in that situation?
So if it's related to a removal, unless you meet those thresholds, then a variance would not be required. So if it was a specimen tree right in the middle of the buildable area, a variance would not be required for that. But if it's a tree that's going to be toward the edge of the property, where you could, shift the proposed structure or something like that, that would trigger the variance requirement. The administrative variance is not related to tree removal, but actually shifting of the structure to be able to give that flexibility so you can reduce your setback to stay out of the critical root zone.
So even if it's quote in the buildable envelope, but it's, it's still in the buildable area, and you can still build, you would still need basically what it is if you can't build, you don't need it because of the tree, you don't need a variance. But if you can't build at all, but if it's actually physically possible to build without a variance, you would have to go and apply for one if you want to remove that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that answers my question. So I think I just want to put this out there that, I heard concerns about, is it too onerous to require a chain link fence and hay bales? I'm satisfied with the fact that they are both required. A, chain link to keep people out, keep trucks and things out, because obviously just the hay bales have not been working. And B, the hay bales are still there necessary for erosion control. Is there wiggle room where if the hay bale is not necessary, the engineer on site can say, okay, this is, it's the slope doesn't require one. Is it still required, or is there wiggle room for them to basically say, okay, you don't really need it, you don't have to have it, but is there a way to put that in the ordinance to have that be an as-needed basis?
I would say so, Councilman Park. We could include language where some of the engineering guidelines pertaining to erosion and sedimentation control on a site dictate where tree protection barrier requires both and where just the chain link fence would be required.
Okay, great. So 2 more points. There's a section concerning the variance where in the most recent text, it says no economic value. And then later, I think it was like item 6 or 7, where it says, this may be a question for the city attorney. Basically, what we're saying is, in order to get a variance, you have to show that you are hindered, and that's kind of. But I'm wondering if is that language that's currently there clear enough to say, hey, you have to get a variance, and even if you're economically impacted, how is that threshold kind of decided? How is that, kind of walk me through what the thresholds would be as far as economic value, as far as the variance and requiring the variance.
What we built into the ordinance, Councilman, is a requirement that the developer or the property owner identify their due diligence prior to purchasing the property and make sure that they were aware of what the issues were with a proposed plan or a considered plan before they spent the money to buy the property. Obviously, dirt in Brookhaven has value, economic value in its current state. Otherwise, we wouldn't be selling lots to tear down the existing structure for $400,000 and $500,000 a piece. So the goal here is, at least as I understand what we've written and what the variance process would be, is not whether or not there's a taking for what the anticipated use is, but is there any use for the property without removal of the tree? So the burden is quite stiff in order to have an applicant get a variance. You have to show that you looked at it, you thought you could do what you wanted to do, and something has changed in the analysis and the application of the analysis in order to show that the hindrance is significant enough to allow you to remove the tree that you want to remove.
Okay, and then because to some people it's kind of confusing because it says no value, but at the same time it has, I forget which item 7. Yeah, it's more of, it's not entirely clear to me, but I accept your explanation. One last thing, as far as, we had discussed codifying what our policy already is so that, we as a city are exempted in right of ways. We need to put in a sidewalk or a path. We need to do that. But as far as plant back in a reasonable way to replace the canopy, have we crafted that language yet? Because I didn't see it as far as the city's requirements to replace that canopy.
Yeah, I think Jeff and Patrice both addressed those issues after the last council meeting with respect to the fact that we're going to look at mature density replacement as opposed to diameter at breast height analysis. So I think that those changes have been made.
What section?
Now you're testing my memory. I'm sorry.
So section 1451, minimum tree density, and the new highlighted addition to this section is and canopy cover requirement. So it's basically 2 different metrics by which an applicant can determine their
No, I'm talking about the city and the right of way for the city to make replacements.
So, okay.
So,
Councilman
Park, I think, was looking for like aspirational language, Chris, and so I don't know.
Because
that has been specifically added.
Okay. It's not a I mean, it's policy now. It's not, I don't want to stop us from passing this in a couple of weeks in order to address this, but we had talked kind of offline about addressing this somehow, maybe not necessarily tree ordinance, but some kind of, in writing document that says we are going to replace this canopy and we're going to replace it in this way if the city removes, trees in the right of way, right? So
yeah, what we did was and I'm sorry, I thought we had made that change since last time, but apparently we didn't get it done yet. We transcribed comments that you had made and others had made at the last council meeting concerning these policies. And we're going to include those aspirational goals in the preamble and the intent and purpose section. And we'll make those changes in the next 3 to 5 days and get those out to the council and the public to review. But the purpose and intent language will help drive both how the department and how the courts look at this ordinance as a whole. And one of the challenges we're facing is how is the new ordinance going to interface with our franchisees who hold franchises for use of our right of ways for utilities and such. So we've got to work through those issues with Georgia Power and the cable companies and so forth as well. So the goal is to hold everybody equally accountable and make sure that people don't come through with, basically grass cutters and just shave trees back to the trunk along the rights of way, which they try to do in our neighborhood every now and again. So that language will be there. I'm sorry it's not done. It should have been done. It's probably my fault for it getting dropped, but we will get it. We'll get it sorted.
I mean, I don't want to hold up the ordinance for it, but it is definitely something that, it's policy now, it's city policy now. We've given clear direction to do so. I would like to, if half of staff wins the lottery, they win the lottery pool and we have to get new people and they have to come in and interpret it again. I want to make sure that it's clear in the code that that is the direction without, us having to give that direction. So that's really, so I'd like to have that clear in the ordinance. But it's not an immediate problem, but I would like that solved. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Sounds good. Well, moving on, discussion dates for Cherry Blossom 2022 Festival.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council again. Mallory Isbicki and I are here this afternoon to discuss the upcoming dates for the 2022 Cherry Blossom Festival. So as you know, we're moving right along this year. So we wanted to get in front of all of you this evening to propose our date for the 2022 event. So I'm going to turn it over to Mallory Isbicki, our special events coordinator. Mallory.
Good afternoon. So the days we are looking at for the 2022 Cherry Blossom Festival would be March 26th and March 27th. That's a Saturday and a Sunday, typical to what we usually follow. And the Cherry Blossom 5K would be run on the Saturday prior to, which would be March 19th. We did a lot of research when trying to propose these dates. We kind of took what you all have given us feedback about in the past. DeKalb County Spring Break is the 4th through the 8th of April. So we tried to avoid the weekends flanking those dates in order to allow the most amount of Brookhaven residents to attend. And through April, very popular festivals have been essentially claimed dates. Ackworth is typically the first weekend in April, so they're a huge competitor of ours. The Dogwood Art Festival is the 9th and the 10th. Easter falls on April 17th. And then Inman Park is April 23rd and 24th. I know a big push is to have this when cherry blossoms are in full bloom, which is early April, late March, and we would have had an awesome one last year, but missed out on it. So competing with any of those other art festivals would definitely impact the amount of and the caliber of artists that we would be able to get for the artist market, which is obviously one of the main points of the festival. So those are the dates, the 26th and 27th of March.
Okay. Questions? Nope. Sounds like everyone's okay with those dates.
Mayor, we're good to proceed and start after we get through with the festival at the end of July, proceed with publicizing the dates for the 2022 event.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
So, excellente. Thank you, guys. Moving on, drone program overview. Lieutenant, welcome. Looking forward to this.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council and everyone. I am very, very pleased to show you all the progress that we've made on our drone program. If everyone can see my screen. I am Lieutenant Abram Ayana. Many of you all have met me before. Presently assigned to the Criminal Investigations Division, and the Chief has given me the pleasure of creating this program working closely with City Attorney Chris Balch to put together a top tier program that not only reflects our mission to provide the highest quality professional police service in partnership with the community. So with that, I will begin. One moment, having an issue with my PowerPoint. So a little bit about who we are. Our UAS team is composed of 17 licensed small UAS rated pilots. Our pilots are all licensed to operate small unmanned aircraft under 50 pounds. The unit is structured with myself as the unit commander and the program coordinator. We have two sergeants that assist me with this mission. One supervises the drone as a first responder capability, and the second supervisor oversees our tactical program, which assists the North Metro SWAT team, as well as our patrol officers in responding to tactical situations where the use of an unmanned aircraft could be beneficial to the department and the city. And then we have our pilots that compose the drone as first responder team and the tactical team. Basically, we operate under 3 COAs that were presently issued. The first is our blanket COA, which covers any operations in uncontrolled airspace across the United States. We also operate under a jurisdictional COA, which covers our operations within DeKalb County and the city of Brookhaven within line of sight. And then we also have what we call a tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver that allows us to fly beyond visual line of sight in extreme emergencies to safeguard human life with certain restrictions. And those restrictions typically outline our capability as it responds to avoiding the nearest obstacle vertically and horizontally. We would mostly see that operation in a tactical situation like a SWAT call out or a burglary in progress or some other crime in progress where it would be hazardous to the pilot to be in an area what we would call the hot zone, or within the area where the violator or the potential threat may be. They're able to be at a standoff distance and fly the drone beyond visual line of sight in response to that emergency. The codes allow the PD also to operate drones at night and over people, as well as some other operations. So basically, I want to tell you a little story about how we got here. Chris Balch has been very, very beneficial and key in engaging some of our strategic partners over at the DA's office, as well as the ACLU of Georgia. We would not have been able to get to this point without significant public pushback if Chris had not been very, very, very key and very insightful in creating those partnerships and those conversations. And as a result of those conversations, we were able to tweak our SOPs and refine certain policies as it pertains to video retention to address some of the concerns from the DA's office as well as the ACLU. Some of those highlights of that policy include our policy saying that we will not retain video of non-criminal incidents longer than 30 days. Those videos from our drone program on a day-to-day basis are uploaded into a cloud-based server similar to our body camera footage. It's the same cloud-based server. They're assigned a classification. If it's a non-criminal incident, after 30 days, it automatically purges itself. We also put in some restrictions on use of vision enhancement or thermal technology, which basically says that we will not be using any sort of video enhancement in an area where there is a privacy interest, unless there is exigent circumstance or a warrant. Our policy also requires that all of our pilots have a remote pilot certificate and says that they must maintain a currency of 3 actual or simulated missions every 30 days. We also built in some prohibitions into the policy, and the policy particularly says that the UAS video surveillance equipment will not be used or shall not be used to conduct random surveillance activities to target a person solely based on their individual characteristics like race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, disability, gender, or sexual orientation. Will also not be used to harass, intimidate, discriminate against any individual or group, or to conduct any personal business. So a little bit about our capabilities. We have used the UAS on a number of crime scenes. The photograph here is a shooting scene at Northeast Plaza. As you can see, we were able to utilize the drone to capture a perspective that until we got these drones, we would not have been able to see. What it would normally have taken is our crime scene investigators to manually go around with the camera and take photographs of the scene. We still do that, of course, but the drone actually gives everyone a perspective where you can see the scale of the scene, and our crime scene investigators using our aerial photography in addition to the actual traditional photography, give the jurors and the prosecutors and all of the recipients who are receiving this information a better idea of what actually occurred and how it occurred and where it occurred. We also, and here's the part that I think many of you will like, is the videos. Put in some videos for you all of some of the operations that we have been able to participate in. Our UAS team is the exclusive UAS provider to the North Metro SWAT team. The video that is on your screen is of a barricaded situation in Sandy Springs where a gentleman held a young lady hostage, allegedly using an AK-47. The SWAT team breached the residence, called for the drone to come in. The drone pilot, as you can see, the door is blown off its hinges. With the charge, the drone pilot is able to navigate that obstacle, enter into the residence, clear the residence of any suspects. And actually, you'll see during this, if you pay attention to the captions, the drone pilot is able to spot an AK pistol on the bedroom inside the apartment. The perpetrator was not inside this apartment, but the weapon was. And you can imagine the safety that we created for our SWAT operators, knowing what was there, where it was, how it was there. And we actually put that special weapons and tactic. Now our SWAT team has an additional tactic that they're able to deploy on their tactical missions. And so the chief mentioned to you all the SWAT incidents that have happened in the past week. And here you'll see the AK on the bed. We have deployed our UAS program with the North Metro SWAT team on each of those incidents in Sandy Springs and here in Brookhaven. Give it one moment, the drone will turn around and you'll see the AK pistol if you haven't seen it yet. The pilot is looking to make sure there's not a person on the side of the bed who could potentially harm the officers when they make entry. And then he will orbit the aircraft and you'll see the AK pistol here on the bed, right there. And then here is the icing on the cake, the drone is first responder, what we're most proud of. As you know, we have already pre-positioned drones on the rooftops at buildings across the city. In this particular incident, the drone is responding to an accident that was reported at the intersection of Briarcliff Road and North Druid Hills. The drone arrived on scene in under a minute and begins checking the area for the accident. The pilot actually locates the accident right there, the white and orange car, provides an updated location to the responding unit, and the responding unit is able to actually approach the accident from a vantage point that got them there quicker. The pilot checks the accident scene for any injuries or signs of person in distress and maintains a visual until the ground unit arrives, also monitoring to see if there's any escalation of hostilities. As we know, there have been quite a bit of road rage incidents in the Metro Atlanta area, and the U.S. pilot is able to monitor that and provide updates to the ground unit. That is another incident where the UAS responded first. And you see here in a moment, this video has been edited, but the patrol unit is arriving there on scene and is able to quickly move the accident out of the roadway. So, a little bit about where we are on our drone as a first responder program. We began daily deployments in late April. Launch locations are strategically placed in the areas with the highest call volume. One area is going to be in the area of North Druid Hills, Buford Highway, and Briarcliff Road in that area. And then the second area is on the northern part of the city along Peachtree Road. And with that area, we're on a higher building. So the higher we get, we actually have better line of sight. And so we can fly farther. So if you can imagine a geofence, or drawing a fence around the city, on the northernmost point, we're able to get as far north as Hermance Drive out to Avelinos at Windsor Parkway, Osborne Road, the entire historic Brookhaven area. We can get to Brookhaven Heights and quite a bit of areas. We can move over as far east as Dresden and Appalachia currently. All of our pilots are on the rooftop are Part 107, meaning they have a pilot's license, and they are the pilots in command for every mission. They're responsible for monitoring the airspace for manned aircraft. As you all know, we are in PDK's controlled airspace. There are a lot of medical helicopters, news helicopters, planes coming in and approach. So it's a very, very busy airspace, and our remote pilots do a very, very good job of navigating the airspace and monitoring the airspace for traffic. I'm pleased to report we have not had any incidents since we've been operating. In addition to the rooftop pilot, there is a teleoperator who's able to remotely pilot the drone from a computer at the police headquarters or anywhere really. It can be done anywhere from a car. It can be done on the other side of the country as long as you have a reliable internet connection. So to give you all a little bit of an idea of why we chose the locations that we did to launch, this is an area, to the left is a map, a heat map, that shows where the most citizen-initiated calls for service are, and then the right side is where the officer-initiated calls for service are. Both of our launch locations in line of sight give us tremendous latitude to move freely across those areas. As it is presently, we operate in line of sight, but I'll get to more of where we're proceeding to as far as our operations here towards the end of my presentation. To date, we've done nearly 100 flights. Our drone responds if the teleoperator determines a reported a known incident can be aided by aerial intelligence, providing decision quality data, and it fits certain criteria. Some of those criteria include whether or not there's a potential for officer safety concerns, like a person armed. If there's a crime in progress, our drone will respond. If there's an incident involving a threat or reasonable potential threat to human life, our drone can be expected to respond. If there's an incident involving fleeing subjects, will respond. And if the use of UAS can reasonably be expected to assist in freeing up emergency personnel for response to other serious incidents. And that tends to happen a lot when we're talking about suspicious persons calls or some other behavior. It can also be dispatched at the request of any officer in the field or any watch commander or supervisor, and that does happen on a regular. Or if there's an incident that an officer can reasonably articulate the use of a drone, enhancing officer and community safety. In all cases, the response will be for a known or reported incident and not for random patrol or surveillance, meaning proactively in hopes of observing or detecting unreported criminal behavior. That's a no-no for us. The teleoperator, once the UAS is on scene, will relay relevant information via radio to assist ground units with relevant information, coordinating a tactical response, and ensuring the recording of police and suspect actions. The response time is typically under 3 minutes. There's another good video for you all of a suspicious person call at Woodward Elementary on Curtis Drive. We received a 911 call that there was a male acting erratically on the playground of the school. The UAS was deployed and responded. Was able to arrive and check the playground area of the school to see if we could locate the subject. The UAS did arrive before the ground unit, and as you can see in the video, begins using the camera to check the playground area for that suspect. I don't want to ruin the surprise, so I'll let the video play here for a moment. And then once the ground unit shows up, they're able to make contact with the subject in a nearby parking lot. And you'll be able to see the erratic behavior that was reported to 911 and that the UAS captures. He starts hopping around a little bit. He does a little break dancing, begins crawling on the ground. He's able to be safely detained and is transported via ambulance to an emergency receiving facility for assistance. So our drone as a first responder program allows UAS technology also to be used as a de-escalation tool. By dispatching the drone as a first responder, our department can remotely assess the scene, determine what type, if any, police response is necessary. And this approach avoids unnecessary confrontations and allows pilots to cancel ground units when no evidence of a crime is found. So looking ahead, closing out my presentation, we are working with our partners at Skyfire, our vendor who is helping us progress our program on a beyond visual line of sight COA. The FAA we're operating right now line of sight, and we're showing the FAA that we can do that safely. And then the FAA, we hope, will give us the authority to operate our drones beyond visual line of sight, so we can go a little bit further in these areas. We're also building out a portion on our webpage that will allow us to publicly share data on our UAS missions, posting the mission or call type, the number of times the drone arrived first on scene, the number of arrests that we've made, whether there was any evidence that was recovered because, hey, the ground unit didn't see somebody throw a gun or drugs, the type of evidence that's recovered. And we're also going to track the use of our thermal imaging so the public can see how many times we've used thermal imaging. And then we're also looking at potential program expansions. Right now, we have one drone that has this capability, as you've seen in the presentation today, to fly enormous lengths over the city, meaning that we can only operate one rooftop location at a time. And we're hopeful that as this program progresses, we'll get additional drones to expand the reach of the program. We're also examining technology such as Live 911 that'll allow us to hear the 911 call sooner, allowing us to get a more prompt response with the drone and provide more decision quality information to first responders on the ground. And as a result, we're going to be able to save more lives and catch more bad guys. And then closing out, we're also building out a public outreach capability. As you all know, the summer festival that's coming up, we will have a presence on the ground with the booth to engage the public on how we're using drones, to show them many of the same videos that I've shown you today, to give them a little background on why we chose this technology and how we're moving. And also look forward to having my team out at some of the food truck events so the public and the children can see our drones in action, ask questions, and they can have an experience. I know a lot of folks are used to seeing the pilot when they get on the aircraft, but not too many are used to seeing a police pilot. So we're going to bring some of them out so they can ask questions about our use of the drone as well. And so with that, I'll open the floor up for questions.
Well, excellent presentation. Fabulous. So questions from council members. Madeline, unmuted first, Lindley. Both raised the hand at the same time. So I'll go with Madeline and then Lindley and then go down from there.
Well, first of all, oh my gosh, I am so impressed. Thank you so much for the comprehensive update and PowerPoint and video showing us how it works. Just really blown away. Thank you for your hard work putting that together for us and everything that BPD has been doing with this new program. I think it's just wonderful. I had a question about the video retention policy. I think you had mentioned that for non-criminal incidents, it's automatically purged after 30 days. And I was curious as to kind of what qualified as a criminal incident. For example, if there's a car wreck and there's a ticket given, for example, is that considered a criminal incident?
No, ma'am. Typically, we would not retain that video as we would for other criminal, like actual felonies and misdemeanors where a physical in custody arrest is made. If it does say if it's a fatality incident where there would be, a misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature or some felony charge that would accompany that, then we would retain that for a longer period of time. And any video can be retained for an extended period of time at the request of a prosecutor.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Or I would assume a subpoena or a request by for retention. I would assume that would.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I saw where Madeline was going. Lindley.
Thank you. Yes, very impressive presentation. Did I understand correctly that you said that at this time the drones are only used as first responders, basically south of Windsor Parkway?
So we have two launch locations. One is located on the Peachtree Road corridor, and the other is in the North Druid Buford Highway, Briarcliff Road area. We only have one drone, so we typically will move between the two locations on any given day. As luck has it on many days, we're on the north side, all the cars are on the south side, and vice versa. So we're moving one drone between multiple locations. The northernmost location does allow us, from a line of sight restriction that the FAA gives us presently, to operate from the Peachtree Road location as far north as Hermance Drive, so we can't access Town Brookhaven. We can go as far west as Windsor Parkway, and that's from a line of sight that's solely because that's where we can see the drone at right now.
Okay, so what would it take for the Brookhaven Police Department to have two drones?
Funding, ma'am. That's it.
That's it.
Yes, ma'am.
And I won't, unless you happen to have those numbers at the ready, ask you what the cost of a drone is. Do you happen to know that?
So the drone itself physically is about a little bit over $10,000. And then the sensor, the camera sensor, depends on what type of sensor we went with. We have a sensor that allows us the capability to have thermal imaging. That's about 11,000. But we can also have a sensor that just allows us to record video. What you've seen today that does not have the thermal capability is about $4,000.
If I could jump in here, it's less about the technology than it is the dedicated staff to fly it, monitor it. So having 2 officers, 2 pilots on duty at the same time to provide dual coverage is probably much more expensive than the actual technology.
I see Gary was jumped in to say something, I think.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. Abram, I think the other important thing is once the FAA gives us permission under COA to fly further, what's the range of the drone?
The drone can fly up to 9 miles.
Yeah.
But it's all dependent on a couple of things, the quality of the internet. If we have quality internet, we can get a quality feed. It also depends on the type of airspace that we're operating in, what the FAA will give us as far as an authorization. I would expect they would give us maybe three nautical miles of a radius. Right now, visual line of sight is about a little bit over 1.25 miles. So I can expect our range to probably double in some areas. And we also have to deal with some altitude restrictions because of the approaches to the airport. But it could certainly expand depending on the location.
Well, 3 nautical miles, would that cover with the 2? Could we cover the entire city with that, or are we still going to have a 2 location process?
So, Mayor, that's a great question. Because of the altitude restrictions, and you can't see it behind me, but I have a large map on my wall that actually lays out what the FAA and PDK have agreed, which is the safe operating altitudes for unmanned aircraft in this airspace. There are going to be some areas that naturally we're not going to be able to fly without special permission from the FAA. The incident this past week on the northern end of the city in Councilmember Jones' district, where the SWAT team was deployed, was an area that the FAA gives us authorization to fly up to 100 feet. And in that incident, I had to contact the FAA in DC for emergency authorization to fly up to 200 feet, and they gave that to us in that incident. I could expect with engaging the FAA to go beyond visual line of sight, so we can have a conversation with them about allowing us, the police department, to operate drones at a different altitude. But once we prove that we can do it safely, I think we'll have more credibility with them, and they'll allow us to operate potentially different than what the published maps say presently.
Okay. Well, thank you to all of you who responded to that question. Obviously, in District 1, we would like to have the advantage of this technology as well, although I see from our crime maps that we tend to have less crime further north in the city. So I think the current placement is certainly appropriate, but we look forward to full coverage for the whole city. And thank you for working toward that goal and for all of your work with the drone officer.
You're welcome. And what I will say, ma'am, is even though we don't have a drone as a first responder capability that far, we do have drones that are mobile, that are carried on patrol, that if there is an incident, can be deployed within minutes in the district.
That is very helpful to know. Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
As I was aware, I thought we bought 4 drones with our program, but I think, so we have a.
We've got capability to operate in a number of applications there.
Yes. Okay, John or Joe?
Just real quick, as a council, our position is to set policy, and we do things that are always in the best interest of our residents, as well as doing things that are in the best interest of the city. And part of the drone program, as far as what's in the best interest of the city, is what it does for us as a branding. And our reputation is supreme when it comes to the professionalism of our police force. And I would like to really make sure I encourage you that when you're doing these events, like at the food truck or wherever, and you're interacting with the public, that you continually boast about what this is, the importance of this in the region, in the state, in the country. I believe that we're the second such city in the United States to have such a program. The only other one is on the West Coast. Things like this really put us at the forefront from a policing standpoint. And I just wanted to put that out there as a reminder to kindly take advantage of it and boast. 'cause
Yes,
we have-
sir. We have great plans. We've been working with Bert Brennan and his team. You're going to see a lot of conversation about this piece coming out here very, very soon.
Excellent. Wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for your efforts. I
Now,
really
I'll finish with
appreciate
an
it.
open invitation to any of you when you have time. Stop by and take a look at it in person.
Can I get to fly it?
No.
As long as we're standing right beside you in case, so we've got geofences, so it'll be very, very hard for you to crash, but that's not a challenge.
All right, you're on. Thank you.
I just, thank you so much, Lieutenant. I do have a couple questions. Obviously, I'm under the impression, from, our two incidents over the last couple of weeks, they happened to be almost simultaneous. And, one was being dealt with on the north side, and then we had a south side incident. I would assume that, had we not, that drone would have been used in the south side incident instantaneously or out.
That's a good expectation, yes, sir.
Yeah. We'd, been able to possibly track someone a little bit quicker. So, no, I commend you and the whole team for getting us off the ground in the drone program. And I look forward to more of these videos and solving crimes and getting the right person. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Alcohol ordinance discussion, Chris.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. This, as I understand the request from Councilman Gebbia, is more designed as an open-ended conversation than it is a presentation of alternatives. The goal here is we've conducted a soup to nuts review of the alcohol ordinance as part of our annual review of this, with what's working and what's not working, as well as what challenges we faced in the previous year. But as I outlined in your last meeting, not as briefly as I intended, but as briefly as a lawyer can, I suppose, there's at least 4 or 5 areas that we just need council input and council discussion on what the will of the council is to make changes to the code to try to limit or remedy some of the bad behaviors we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months. The first among those was Councilmember Gebbia's concern that we have become a bit of a magnet for the after hours crowd, because our restaurants are authorized to be open later than a lot of other places around us. And previously, when this conversation has been held about shortening our operating hours to either 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning instead of the current 2 o'clock in the morning, it has met with some substantial opposition, both from the restaurant community as well as some specific businesses within the restaurant community. So we wanted to bring the question to the council as a general rule and find out where you all were, both individually and collectively, on a more specific conversation of, is it of any interest to the council to limit the sale of alcohol for on-premise consumption to a 12:30 close and a 1 o'clock out the door, or a 1 o'clock out the door, 1 o'clock close with a 1:30 out the door instead of our current hours.
Chris, if I could interject.
Please, sir.
Yeah, it's not as simple as that. The whole program, as I originally envisioned it, was to present a scenario that may be coming down the road as a byproduct of the decisions made by the mayor of Atlanta to address their 20 accounts that they identify as potential problematic businesses or nuisance properties. And it's basically the late night establishments that constitute that. And we've been the byproduct of that kind of negative action before with what's resulted in here. So the conversation isn't just simply cutting it back to a 12:30 or 1 o'clock close. It's considering that and or all other actions that may be necessary. So I'd like to just preempt what you say by just saying, in every situation, you got good actors and you got bad actors. So I'm not in favor of trying to penalize good actors for the bad actors. But as I sent out the memo to everybody, everything is on the table, including a 12:30 close. That's not my preferred attack on this, or my preferred direction. And I just want to clarify that.
Well, I appreciate that clarification, council member. And the global goal of this evening's conversation is to work through all of the various pieces. And some of the things I think the assistant city manager and I have some concrete recommendations for the policy body to consider. With respect to the timing, what we learned in 2017 is that we can't we can't do what you're describing, that is treat some businesses differently just because of who they are or what they are, because we tried to, back when the exit agreement with the Pony was in effect, we tried to govern the Pony under the exit agreement, and Judge Thrash at the Northern District of Georgia told us we were basically treating two similarly situated alcohol businesses differently under our ordinance, and he wasn't going to let us do that. So among the various things that have been discussed is the closing time, and I was just trying to work through those various options individually rather than trying to do some sort of freewheeling conversation that was much more difficult for me to follow or manage. So I was being a little selfish in how I approached your concerns.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was one of 7 recommendations that I had basically put forth as a guideline. So 6 recommendations for conversations, and it's definitely on the table for consideration. Like I'll clarify, it's not the only one.
No.
And as far as treating businesses differently, the approach that I had recommended initially was to look at our process for approving businesses, not to treat them differently. Right. But I mean, where did we fall? Where did we fail? Where were the holes as far as that allowed some businesses to get in last time? And are there things that we could be doing to vet better, for example? So that is the general conversation that I was really hoping to ensue in this, but please continue.
Well, the answer to your question is that we are limited by due process, state's precedent, and state statute on what we can ask and how we could decide who is issued a license and who is not issued a license. And our process worked with respect to some of what have become our bad actors. We can, and one of the things I think the chief financial officer and I agree on is the idea that we would like to add changes to our alcohol ordinance for PD and for the finance department to get more data on who the investors are. With respect to one particular business that we have information that an alcohol license is coming, based on the location and the fact that they're maintaining the same business name, we've told those applicants and their lawyers that we anticipate asking them to give us a full list of every investor they have. Now, our ordinance currently only allows us to do background checks on those folks with a 10% ownership or more, but we want to know who everybody is. That is a concrete change to our ordinance that we would be recommending to the council. Mm-hmm. But we will also need to write into that ordinance change a modification to what qualifies as a disqualifying ownership interest. If you have what previous information that we can obtain legally is going to tell us that you're not allowed to be an owner or an investor in a restaurant. We don't have in Brookhaven, other than the hotels that have on-premise consumption, we don't have anything but restaurants in Brookhaven. So that is the only kind of business we have. The 20 businesses that the mayor of Atlanta was targeting are all bars, both under state code and under city ordinance. So bars are not open on Sundays. They don't have to serve food, and they have a completely different set of regulations that don't apply to any Brookhaven business because nobody in Brookhaven is licensed as a bar. One of the things we've talked about with the chief financial officer is food audits. What mechanisms does the council want us to utilize with respect to going behind the alcohol excise tax returns that we get and the annual renewal or the applications that we get to find out what the real data is on what people are selling. Under state law, a restaurant who can be open on Sunday has to have at least 50% of its gross retail sales as food products. We don't have any mechanism in place right now, and certainly don't have the staff to investigate to determine whether or not any of our businesses are out of compliance with that. I have my suspicions, and I think those are reasonable suspicions, and I'm not going to slander anybody by articulating those, but we don't have the ability or the mechanism to go behind and audit those suspicions and find out if there's any validity to them or not. We already have security measures that are mandated. We are limited by U.S. Supreme Court precedent about how much access we can get to some of those security measures. The Supreme Court ruled in 2018 that even if you have a state or a city required document or surveillance mechanism, absent a warrant, you can't just go in and demand that somebody provide that to you. So we, again, the law gets in the way of some of these things that we've asked for or that have been discussed. The fire marshal already does occupancy compliance checks with, it would require a budget amendment in both his office and in community development office to enhance those or to make those more frequent, because he's going to be earning overtime when he's out and about in the evenings doing these various challenges. One of the things you mentioned in your memorandum, Councilman Gebbia, is landlord involvement. I have had a number of landlords ask us for information. Nobody has asked us to help them get rid of a problem tenant. And I think, frankly, if we were to go down that road, we would see both the city and the landlord being sued on tortious interference with contract claims, as well as various other theories to say that, we're illegally or unlawfully targeting people or interfering with their ability to contract by interfering with their quiet enjoyment of their properties. So I am all about trying to find alternatives, but I have to tell you where the limits are at the same time I'm trying to help you find alternatives. So that's a very long-winded sort of summary of the top four. And again, I'd like to go back and just take those in pieces if we can start that way. And I know we've got an executive session that we need to get to, and so I'm trying to be as efficient as possible. But the challenge that we face is it is a particularized problem for which we are looking for a systemic fix. And those two things are often incompatible. So that's the reason I was trying to take it piece by piece and pick it apart in pieces and see if there were individualized things that either had support or didn't have support, so we could move on and either accept those or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Yeah, Lily?
For other tax audits, we use outside contractors who provide that service. Is there such an outside contractor for food and beverage audits?
Steve, can you take that one?
Yeah, I can go with that one. Yes, I believe that the first audit we used the accounting firm of Fraser and Dieter to do the excise tax audit. This audit would be very similar to that with respect to food sales. Again, it's another one of those accounting type audits. So I would engage them again. They did a very good job on the first go around, and I could talk to them to see if they would have the time and staff resources to be able to provide an audit on the food sales side.
Okay, and I think that is something that I would like to see explored, because right now it's sort of a nonsense requirement in that I think that folks who are operating something that should be subject to bar regulations, but that's actually, they're operating it as a restaurant, they're not even concerned. They know they're not going to be audited. Why would they go through the additional expense and administrative hurdles of owning up to the fact that they are in fact a bar, not a restaurant under the law? So I think that in order for our law to be taken seriously, it needs to have some kind of an enforcement mechanism that we actually act on, at least periodically. So I'm interested in exploring an outside auditor, and not only that, but if I remember correctly, for example, with the excise tax audit, it more than pays for itself.
Oh, yeah, it definitely more than paid for itself, the excise tax audit. And one thing that was born out of our excise tax audit is we did change our excise tax form to include the vendor or the businesses putting a food sales dollar amount on their excise tax forms. So we may have the data already to do this. Again, it's just an issue of assigning resources to get it completed.
But are you saying that the applicant themselves provided the food figure?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's not a true audit, right? That's just
Well, we would get that figure and then we would audit them.
audit that figure. Got it.
Correct.
So I would like to know if I have the support of my fellow council members in requesting staff to explore a vendor for the city to use for food and beverage audits.
Hey, Lindley, can I add to that and maybe expand upon it for your consideration? Lindley?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe, but Steve.
How about if we approach this
We're
like
about to jump into.
How about if we take what Lindley just suggested and maybe apply a similar rule of thumb as what we did with the apartment complexes, where we have a rolling audits that they pay for, has to be an approved auditor from the city. And if that auditor is found to have not played fairly in the game, they get booted they lose their opportunity to audit in Brookhaven again in the future. And the cost for the audit is borne by the business and not the city. As we do.
The audit, to do that would require a code change, Councilman Gebbia.
Sure.
Because the current code allows us to audit it, but it would be a city expense to undertake that effort. And we have, in the one situation where actually in resolving the excise tax dispute with one of our businesses, we demanded that they provide us audited profit and loss statements, which showed their split between food sales and alcohol sales. And they completely just thumbed their nose at that requirement and actually had a lawyer come in and testify at their non-renewal hearing that he did what he thought he was supposed to do, despite the plain language of the agreement that he signed and he got his client to sign. So this is as I say, this is a specific problem for which we are going to apply a systemic solution. And I don't know what the city manager's concern is. I'm not going to presume to speak for
not
him.
necessarily a concern, but there's a fundamental difference in this type of audit versus all the others in that this audit is for the ability to be open on Sunday. So as we get the audit results, there is no negotiating. You will be, if you don't meet the threshold, you will be closed on Sunday permanently. So that's just something to consider. This type of audit versus just pay your taxes and you can stay open. In this case, some of our restaurants, maybe well-known restaurants, will be able to open on Sunday.
Yeah, and that brings up another point, is that it would not be a suspension or revocation of an alcohol license if you don't qualify. You simply don't meet the threshold, the definitional threshold under state law to be able to be to serve alcoholic beverages or be open on Sundays. I mean, you could be open and serve food on Sunday, but you would not be able to sell alcohol on Sundays, which most of these businesses claim that they wouldn't be open at all but for their alcohol sales, which I think is telling all by itself.
And the ruling is it's a 12-month average. So it would take them possibly 12 months to be able to get back into compliance.
Right. The challenge that we're going to face, unlike the alcohol ordinances where we have competing data from alcohol vendors, the wholesalers that deliver alcohol to all of our licensed premises, provide us a report of who they've sold alcohol and how much to every month. We don't have those similar reports from, Cisco Systems or from any of the other potential wholesale food providers that are available. So one of the things that we may need to do, I think our ordinance gives us the power, but I want to look at it one more time before I say definitely. But one of the things we may be able to do is use administrative subpoena power under our alcohol code to demand them to provide us the receipts of what food that they have bought, and then also the point of sale receipts for what they claim to have sold, so that we have both sides of that transaction to marry against the reported numbers and determine whether or not they've met the 50% threshold or not.
Joe, you had some more?
No, Lindley, thank you for allowing me to add to that. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, I appreciate your thoughts. And if the only difference is whether the establishment's allowed to be open on Sunday,
Right.
That's very different analysis than if they owed additional taxes, because under that scenario, it doesn't pay for itself unless we had the business pay for it, which I don't know that that's necessary. I mean, do I understand correctly that is the sole difference under our current code and under current state law, whether they're allowed to be open on Sunday?
That is the primary difference. We would also have potential criminal penalties for the false swearing for the monthly excise tax returns if those returns turn out to be incorrect. So we would have monetary penalties we could go seek in municipal court for those false swearings, but the primary enforcement purpose would be to shut people down on Sundays who would not be allowed to otherwise operate.
Well,
and these businesses also are by not allowing them to have alcohol on Sundays, most will claim that you will be putting an undue hardship on them and their business model doesn't work if they cannot serve alcohol on Sundays.
Especially if it's a Super Bowl. Chris, the percentage on restaurants and food sales is set by the state, correctly?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, and that I have talked to other city managers about this in the past, and I couldn't find a single city that had done these audits before. Chris, would the city be allowed to do a sampling just to see where we're at and not enforce the closure?
I think if the city developed information that a particular business was not in compliance with state law, that we would have an obligation to both report that non-compliance to the Department of Revenue and to not allow that business to sell alcohol on Sundays. I don't know that we'd have that discretion.
Okay, because that's different than the excise tax where we actually went out and did some testing to see what the magnitude of the problem might be. Then we hired an audit firm to go do the work. It sounds like we have no discretion based on what we find. If we find they don't meet the 50%, we got to do what we got to do on the closure.
Yeah, excise taxes are fundamentally within the legislative grace of the council. So the council sets the rules about what's allowed and what's not allowed. The state statute with Sunday sales restricts that discretion substantially.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, well, I appreciate that information, and it certainly doesn't sound like it necessarily accrues to the benefit of the Brookhaven taxpayers to identify those institutions. In fact, to the contrary, to the extent that there's tax realized from their operations at all, it could do the opposite. Now, that being said, of course, businesses in the city of Brookhaven are required to comply with the law, but I don't see the benefit of the audit, and I appreciate y'all exploring and having the conversation with me. But at this point, I don't think I see the benefit.
Madeline, John?
Yeah, I don't see the benefit at this point either.
Okay. Well, Madeline and John, do you have any other comments on the subject?
No comments.
Okay. So the, to go to Joe's point and concern of potential, future coming in, and I apologize, is, I heard you correct, Chris, if we required some kind of security, or we cannot require that, if we required security for everyone, that would not be allowed, or would be allowed, or what's?
No, we currently require any business that sells alcohol for on-premises consumption and is open after midnight to have closed circuit surveillance television. And it's the access to that recording that can be problematic. We had a provision in the code from 2017 that basically said we had the right to go in and demand copies of those recordings if we had evidence that there was a crime either at or associated with the premises. The Supreme Court ruled, as I said, in 2018, that somehow is problematic, that those records actually belong to the business. And there's a Fourth Amendment issue with respect to the PD being able to get those. So the new rule is that we've got to, if there's a incident at a business, we've got to go get a warrant in order to retrieve those recordings. The challenge is finding a magistrate to sign the warrant, having enough facts to get a warrant, finding a magistrate to sign the warrant, and then getting back before there's somebody who's damaged, disconnected, or otherwise tampered with the with the recording devices. And I don't use that example lightly because we actually had that case happen in Brookhaven. So we have the ability to require the surveillance. Getting access to it it becomes the sticking point.
Could we audit that?
And make sure all of them are there?
Yeah, and that they're actually recording.
Short answer is, yeah. I mean, having it and making sure it's working is not an inspection or demand for the contents of the materials. So yeah, I think you could probably, excuse me, as part of an administrative inspection, make sure that those businesses that are open late have those systems in place and that they're working.
John, may I?
Yeah.
Chris, could we update our ordinance and say recordings have to be maintained for a minimum of 7 days? So if you're worried about getting a warrant or whatever period of time, if you're worried about getting a warrant and having malfeasance take place at the establishment, if they're found to have inappropriately addressed or damaged or whatever on the video equipment, then there's a subsequent penalty. Wouldn't that be an answer to it?
There is already a subsequent penalty for attempted criminal damage to evidence. So that is itself a felony. There's also, you could also possibly have a misdemeanor charge of obstruction of an officer under those facts. So there are already statutes in place in the state law at the state that provide the remedy that you're looking for under those circumstances. The requirement of maintaining those of a minimum retention period, I don't have the code pulled up in front of me, but I don't think we currently have that. It is something we could consider amending to add to the code if it's not already there.
And it might be interesting, Chris, if we could put a notification requirement in the code to say, if your equipment is not working, you must notify the Brookhaven Police Department within 24 hours of the equipment not working as part of the ordinance as well. That way, you don't get the, oh, it's been not working for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think that's probably a positive. The the challenge we've had with a couple of businesses is there have been serious incidents at those businesses, and there is the video recording system has been seized pursuant to a warrant in part of those investigations. And the business is still complaining to this day that they haven't gotten their equipment back. Well, the reason they haven't gotten their equipment back is because the equipment's still part of an ongoing and existing investigation. And as long as the prosecuting attorney's office has that material and says they have an ongoing investigation, there's nothing I can do to get it back or to give it back. So there's a little bit of whining about process, but there's also the legitimate need of law enforcement to know that they don't have an asset that we're supposed to have.
That's a good suggestion, Steve.
Yeah, the couple of other things that Chris and I are also looking at is putting in a notification requirement for any change of ownership. I know that there was concerns in the past that an applicant will come in with names that will pass all of our due diligence for an alcohol license, and then the ownership changes after the application is approved. So we're going to put in a notification requirement for any change of ownership. And as something came up today, and I haven't talked to Chris about this yet, but it also might be a requirement, and we're going to see how far we can go on it, to that the business will be required to give us any lease agreements for the space they're renting as part of the application process.
That notification for change of ownership, is that simply just notify us, or does it have to be approved that that ownership is acceptable?
Well, I think that they would have to notify us, and they're going to have to tell us what the percentage ownership is, and then we're going to have to make a decision of whether that new owner needs to go through background check or not.
When we vet, do we have like limiting parameters, like if there's been a felony by that individual, then they're not allowed to have that position? Or, I mean,
yeah, well, we have a 10% cutoff.
yeah.
So ownership, once you get over 10%, then you have to go through the full background check. Then we start finding if there's felonies involved. Then we start saying that license is not going to be approved.
Is that 10% our number, or is it a state number, or what?
The 10% is our number. It's a threshold that we created about significant ownership and the ability to have a say in the management of the business. I'm not aware of any codes across the state where the background checks go below a 10% ownership stake.
Anything else, Steve?
That's Chris is hitting high points. So there's some details involved on the way we want to do with as far as process through the finance department that we can work out to make it smoother. But as far as compliance goes, conducting the excise tax audits, that is very helpful, and getting some additional support with due diligence at the onset will definitely help to be able to screen good actors from bad, hopefully.
Mr. Mayor, we're going to run out of time, so I'd like to.
I think there's some good information and things to go forward, and these are gonna.
I would like to
go forward. We'll be continuing the conversation on this.
Yeah.
And we do have executive session we got to get to.
Yeah, I just want to suggest that I sit down with both our attorney and our assistant city manager and formulate some specific suggestions to bring back to council for consideration. Okay.
Sounds good. Okay. Moving on, we do have an executive session that we need to get done before our 7 o'clock. Christian, there's something else you popped up?
No, just to remind you, we have an executive session.
Yep, we have executive session. It is in our calendar, and supposedly it was going to be emailed to us, folks. And with that, give us a 5-minute break. I'll if we do executive session and be there in 5 minutes.
And the email will have come from Zach.
Yes.
And what are we discussing in executive session?
Potential
Potential
litigation.
litigation.
I move to go into executive session for potential litigation.
I second.
And wasn't it, it was only potential litigation? There was nothing else?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, sounds good.
Can we come back at 6:20?
I'm fine with 6:20.
Okay, thanks.
Everyone, 6:20 it is.
Aye.
Motion made, second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're in executive session.